February 28th, 1899, Volume 2. By order of the confessor, I begin to write what passes between me and our Lord day by day. Year 1899, month of February, day 28. I confess the truth. I feel great repugnance. The effort I have to make in order to conquer myself is so great that the Lord alone can know the torture of my soul. But, O holy obedience, what a powerful bond you are! You alone could win over me, and surpassing all my repugnance, almost impassable mountains, you bind me to the will of God and of the confessor. But please, O holy spouse, as great as my sacrifice is, so much help do I need. I want nothing but that you hold me in your arms and sustain me. In this way, assisted by you, I will be able to say only the truth, only for your glory and to my confusion. This morning, since the confessor celebrated Mass, I also received communion. My mind was in a sea of confusion because of this obedience that the confessor gave me to write everything that passes in my interior. As I received Jesus, I began to tell him of my pains, especially my insufficiency, and many other things. But Jesus did not seem to care about this thing of mine and did not answer to anything. A light came to my mind, and I said, "Who knows whether I myself am the cause for which Jesus is not showing himself as usual?" So with all my heart I said to him, "Oh, please, my good and my all, don't show yourself so indifferent with me. You make my heart split with pain. If it is because of the writing, let it be, even if it cost me the sacrifice of my life. I promise I will do it." Then Jesus changed appearance, and all benign he told me, "What do you fear? Have I not assisted you the other times? My light will surround you everywhere, and so you will be able to manifest it." Purity of intention. While he was saying this, I don't know how, I saw the confessor near Jesus, and the Lord told him, "See, everything you do passes into heaven. Therefore see what purity you must operate, thinking that all of your steps, words, and works come before my presence. And if they are pure, that is, if they are done for me, I take greatest delight in them, and I feel them around me like many messengers that remind me continuously of you. But if they are done for low and earthly purposes, I feel bothered by them." And as he was saying this, he seemed to grab his hands, and raising them up to heaven, he said to him, "Your eyes always on high. You are of heaven. Work for heaven." While I was seeing the confessor, and Jesus saying this to him, in my mind it seemed to me that if one operated in that way, it would happen as to a person who has to leave one house to move to another. What does he do? First he sends all of his things and everything he possesses, and then he goes himself. In the same way, we first send our works to take a place for us in heaven, and then when our time comes, we go ourselves. Oh, what a beautiful cortege they will make for us! Faith. Now, while seeing the confessor, I remembered he had told me that I was to write about faith in the way in which the Lord had spoken to me about this virtue. While I was thinking of this, in one instant the Lord drew me so much to himself that I felt I was outside of myself, in the vault, of the heavens, together with Jesus. And he told me these exact words: faith is God. But these two words contained an immense light, such that it is impossible to explain them. But I will do what I can. In the word faith, I comprehended that faith is God himself. Just as material food gives life to the body so that it may not die, faith gives life to the soul. Without faith, the soul is dead. Faith vivifies. Faith sanctifies. Faith spiritualizes man and makes him keep his eyes fixed on a supreme being in such a way that he learns nothing of the things of down here. And if he learns them in God. Oh, the happiness of a soul who lives of faith! Her flight is always toward heaven. In everything that happens to her, she always looks at herself in God. And so, just as in tribulation, faith raises her in God, and she does not afflict herself, not even with a lament, knowing that she is not to form her contentment here, but in heaven. In the same way, if joy, riches, and pleasures surround her, faith raises her in God, and she says to herself, "Oh, how much more content and rich I will be in heaven." So she feels bothered by these earthly things. She despises them and tramples them underfoot. It seems to me that to a soul who lives of faith, it happens as to a person who possessed millions upon millions of coins, and even entire kingdoms, and someone else wanted to offer him a cent. What would he say? Would he not disdain it? Would he not throw it in his face? I add, and what if that cent were all muddy, just as earthly things are? Even more, what if that cent were only lent to him? This person would say, "I enjoy and possess immense riches, and you dare to offer me this miserable cent, so muddy and only for a short time?" I believe he would quickly remove his gaze from it, and would not accept the gift. So does the soul who lives of faith with regard to earthly things. Now let us go back again to the idea of food. By taking food, the body is not only sustained, but shares in the substance of the food, which transforms into the body itself. The same for the soul who lives of faith. Since faith is God himself, the soul comes to live of God himself, and by nourishing herself with God, she comes to share in the substance of God, and by sharing in him, she comes to resemble him and to be transformed with God himself. Therefore it happens to the soul who lives of faith that just as God is holy, the soul is holy. Powerful God, powerful the soul. Wise, strong, and just God, wise, strong, and just the soul. And so with all the other attributes of God. In sum, the soul becomes a little God. Oh, the blessedness of this soul on earth, to then be more blessed in heaven. I also understood that the words that the Lord says to his beloved souls, "I will espouse you in the faith," means nothing less but that the Lord, in this mystical marriage, comes to endow the souls with his own virtues. It seems to me that it happens as two spouses. As they join their properties together, the belongings of one can no longer be distinguished from those of the other, but both of them become their owners. However, in our case, the soul is poor. All the good comes from the Lord, who lets her share in his possessions. The life of the soul is God. Faith is God. And the soul, by possessing faith, comes to graft all the other virtues into herself in such a way that faith is like a king in her heart, and the other virtues remain around it as the subjects that serve faith. So without faith, virtues themselves are virtues that have no life. It seems to me that God communicates faith to man in two ways. The first is holy baptism. The second is when blessed God, by unleashing a particle of his substance into the soul, communicates to her the virtue of making miracles, like raising the dead, healing the sick, stopping the sun, and the like. Oh, if the world had faith, it would change into a terrestrial paradise. Oh, how high and sublime is the flight of the soul who exercises herself in faith. It seems to me that by exercising herself in faith, the soul acts like those timid little birds which, for fear of being caught by hunters, or of some other snare, establish their dwelling at the top of the trees, or in high places. And then, when they are forced to take food, they descend, take the food, and immediately fly back into their dwelling. And some of them, more cautious, take the food and don't even eat it on the ground, but in order to be safer, they carry it up to the top of the trees, and there they swallow it. In the same way, the soul who lives of faith is so timid with earthly things that for fear of being snared, she doesn't so much as glance at them. Her dwelling is up high, that is, above all the things of the earth, but especially in the wounds of Jesus Christ. And from within those blessed rooms, she moans, cries, prays, and suffers together with her spouse Jesus over the condition and the misery in which mankind lies. While she lives inside those holes of the wounds of Jesus, the Lord gives her a particle of his virtues, and the soul feels those virtues within herself as if they were her own. However, she realizes that even though she sees them as her own, the possession of them is given to her, for they have been communicated by the Lord. It happens to her as to a person who has received a gift which he did not have. What does he do? He takes it and makes himself the owner of it. However, every time he looks at it, he says to himself, "This is mine, but it was given to me by so-and-so." So also does the soul whom the Lord transforms in himself by unleashing a particle of his divine being from himself. Now, just as this soul abhors sin, she also feels compassion for others and prays for those whom she sees walking on the path of the precipice. She unites herself with Jesus Christ and offers herself as victim in order to placate divine justice and to spare creatures the deserved chastisements. And if the sacrifice of her life were necessary, oh, how gladly she would make it for the salvation of one soul alone. How she sees the divinity of Jesus. After the confessor told me to explain to him how I sometimes see the divinity of our Lord, I answered that it was impossible for me to be able to tell him anything. But at night, blessed Jesus appeared to me and almost reproached me because of this refusal of mine. And then he flashed through me with two most luminous rays. With the first one I understood in my intellect that faith is God, and God is faith. I tried to say a few things about faith. Now I will try to say how I see God. And this was the second ray. While I am outside of myself, and I find myself in the height of the heavens, I seem to see God within a light. He himself seems to be light, and within this light there is beauty, strength, wisdom, immensity, height, depth, endless and boundless. Even in the air we breathe is God present, and we breathe him. So each one can make him his own life, as indeed he is. Nothing escapes him, and nothing can escape him. This light seems to be all voice, though it does not speak, and all operating, though it always rests. It is present everywhere, though it occupies no space. And while it is present everywhere, it also has its own center. Oh God, how incomprehensible you are. I see you. I feel you. You are my life. You restrict yourself within me, but you remain always immense and lose nothing of yourself. Yet I feel I am stammering, and it seems I can say nothing. In order to explain myself better according to our human language, I will say that I see a shadow of God in the whole creation, because in the whole creation, someplace he has cast the shadow of his beauty, someplace his fragrances, someplace his light, as in sun, in which I see a special shadow of God. I see him as though concealed within this sphere, as the king of all other spheres. What is the sun? It's nothing but a globe of fire. One is the globe, but its rays are many. From this we can easily understand how the globe is God, and the rays are the immense attributes of God. Second, the sun is fire, but it is also light and heat. Here is the most holy Trinity veiled in the sun. The fire is the Father, the light is the Son, the heat is the Holy Spirit. However, the sun is one, and just as one cannot separate fire from light and heat, so one is the power of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, who in reality cannot be separated from one another. And just as fire produces light and heat at the same time, in such a way that fire cannot be conceived without light and heat, in the same way, the Father cannot be conceived before the Son and the Holy Spirit, and vice versa. But all three of them have the same eternal beginning. I add that the light of the sun diffuses everywhere. In the same way, God penetrates everywhere with his immensity. However, let us remember that this is but a shadow, because the sun cannot reach where it cannot penetrate with its light, while God penetrates everywhere. God is most pure spirit, and we can represent him with the sun, which makes its rays penetrate everywhere, and no one can grab them with their hands. Moreover, God looks at everything, the iniquities and the evils of men, but he remains always as he is, pure, holy, and immaculate. A shadow of God is the sun, which sends its light over rubbish, but remains immaculate. It spreads its light in the fire, but is not burned, in the sea and in the rivers, but is not drowned. It gives light to all. It fecundates everything. It gives life to all with its heat, but does not become poor in light, nor does it lose any of its heat. Even more, while it does so much good to all, it needs no one, and remains always as it is, majestic, shining, ever immutable. Oh, how well one can see the divine qualities in the sun! With his immensity, God is present in the fire, but is not burned, in the sea, but is not drowned, under our steps, but is not trampled. He gives to all, but does not become poor, and needs no one. He looks at everything. Even more, he is all eyes, and there is nothing he does not hear. He is aware of each fiber of our hearts, of each thought of our minds, but being most pure spirit, he has neither ears nor eyes, and no matter what happens, he never changes. The sun invests the world with its light, and it does not tire. In the same way, God gives life to all, helps and rules the world, and he does not tire. A man can hide or place shelters so as not to enjoy the light of the sun and its beneficial effects. But he does nothing to the sun. The sun remains as it is, while all the evil will fall upon man. In the same way, by sin, the sinner can move away from God and no longer enjoy his beneficial effects. But he does nothing to God. The evil is all his own. The roundness of the sun also symbolizes the eternity of God, which has no beginning and no end. The penetrating light of the sun itself is such that no one can restrict it in his eye, and if one wanted to stare at it in its midday fullness, he would remain dazzled. And if the sun wanted to draw near man, man would be reduced to ashes. The same for the divine sun. No created mind can restrict it in its little mind, so as to comprehend it in all that it is. And if it wanted to try, it would remain dazzled and confused. And if this divine sun wanted to display all its love, allowing man to feel it while he is in his mortal flesh, he would be reduced to ashes. So God has cast a shadow of himself and of his perfections over the whole creation. It seems that we see him and touch him, and we are touched by him continuously. In addition to this, after the Lord said those words, "Faith is God," I said to him, "Jesus, do you love me?" And he added, "And you, do you love me?" Immediately I said, "Yes, Lord, and you know that without you I feel that life is missing in me." "Well then," Jesus continued, "you love me, I love you. So let us love each other and remain always together." This is how he ended for this morning. Now who can say how much my mind has comprehended of this divine sun? I seem to see it and touch it everywhere. Even more, I feel invested by it, inside and out. But my capacity is so very little. While it seems it comprehends something about God, The moment I see him, it seems I have comprehended nothing. Even more, it seems I have spoken nonsense. I hope that Jesus will forgive my nonsense. February 28th, 1906, Volume 7. The greatest honor that the creature can give to God is to depend on his divine will in everything. The way in which grace communicates itself. This morning, blessed Jesus made himself seen for just a little and told me, "My daughter, the greatest honor that the creature can give to God is to depend on his divine will in everything." And the Creator, in seeing that the creature fulfills her duty of creature toward the Creator, communicates his grace to her. And while he was saying this, a light came out of blessed Jesus, which made me comprehend the way in which he communicates grace. I understood it in this way. For example, the soul feels within herself the annihilation of herself. She sees her nothingness, her misery, her inability to do a shadow of good. Now, while she feels this way, God communicates his grace, and the grace of truth, in such a way that the soul can see the truth in everything without deceit, without darkness. And here is how. What God is by nature, eternal truth which cannot deceive nor be deceived, the soul becomes by grace. That is to say, the soul feels detachment from the things of the earth. She sees their fleetingness, their instability, how everything is false, everything is wrought, which deserves to be abhorred rather than loved. While the soul feels this state, God communicates his grace, and the grace of true love and of eternal love. He communicates his beauty in such a way as to make the loving soul go mad, and the soul remains filled with the love and the beauty of God. And here is how. What God is by nature, love and eternal beauty, the soul becomes by grace. And so with all the other divine virtues, such that if I wanted to say everything, I would be too long. I only add that grace anticipates the soul. It excites her. But only when the soul masticates those truths and swallows them like food into her bosom. Then it communicates itself and enters to take possession of her. This is why not everyone receives the effects described above, because they let them escape from their minds like lightnings, and do not make a place for them. February 28th, 1912, Volume 11. The sign that one loves only Jesus. How one who loves him is united with him. This morning, as my adorable Jesus came, I told him, "Oh, my heart, my life, and my all, how can it be known if one loves you or others?" My daughter, if the soul is completely full of me up to the brim, to the extent of overflowing, that is to say, if she does not think of, search for, speak to, and love other than myself, it seems that nothing else exists for her. Rather, the rest bores and bothers her. At the most, she gives nothing but scrap, which is not God, like the last thought, a word, or one act, for a necessary thing of the natural life. This is merely giving what remains to nature. This is what saints do. I did it too, with myself and with the apostles, giving dispositions on where to spend the night, what to eat. Giving all this to nature harms neither love nor the true sanctity, and it is a sign that the creature loves me only. But if the soul is alternating among various things, now she thinks of me, now of something else, now she talks about me, and then for a long time about something else, and so on with the rest, this is a sign that she does not love me only, and I am not happy about it. So if she squanders herself with everyone and within her own thoughts, keeping for me only a last thought or word or act, it is a sign that she does not love me. And even if she gives me something, it is nothing other than a miserable scrap. Yet this is what most creatures do. Ah, my daughter, those who love me are united to me like the branches are united to the trunk of the tree. Can there ever be separation, forgetfulness, or different food between the branches and the trunk? One is their life, one the purpose, the same the fruits. Or better still, the trunk is the life of the branches, and the branches are the glory of the trunk. They are all the same thing. These are to me the souls who love me. February 28th, 1924, Volume 16. All the goods which God prepared and established in creation in order to give them to the creatures are suspended, waiting for those who will return to their original order. This is what he is doing in Luisa as first. While I was praying, I felt my adorable Jesus within my interior, now praying, now suffering, and now as though working. He called me very often by name, and I said to him, "Jesus, what do you want? What are you doing? It seems to me that you are very busy and that you suffer much. And while you call me, drawn by your occupations, you then forget that you have called me, and so you don't tell me anything." And Jesus, "My daughter, I am so busy in you, for I am carrying out all the works of living in my will. It is necessary that I first do it in you, and as I do it, I bind all your interior with the unending light of my will, so that your little human will may be connected to it, and take in it its first place. And expanding within it, it may receive all the good which the divine will wants to give to the human will. You must know that as the divinity decreed creation, it delivered all that it was to give to the creature, the gifts, the graces, the caresses, the kisses of love which it was to manifest to her. Just as it delivered the sun, the stars, the blue heavens, and all the rest, so it delivered all the gifts with which it was to enrich the souls. Now, as man withdrew from the supreme will, he rejected all these goods. But the divinity did not withdraw them into itself. It left them suspended in its will, waiting for the human will to bind itself to its will and to enter into the original order created by it, so as to place in current with human nature all the gifts established by it. Therefore all the fineness of love, the kisses, the caresses, the gifts, the communications, and my innocent amusements which I was to have with Adam, had he not sinned, are suspended in my will. My will wants to unload these heaps of goods which it had established to give to creatures, and this is why I want to establish the law of living in my will, to place in force between creator and creature all these suspended goods. This is why I am working in you, to reorder your will with the divine. In this way I will be able to give start to and to place in current the many goods which until now have been suspended between creator and creature. I so much care about this reordering of the human will with the divine, and that the human will live completely in it, that until I obtain this, I feel as if creation did not have its primary purpose. Besides, I created creation not because I needed it. I was more than sufficiently happy by myself. If I created it, it was because with all the goods we contained within ourselves, we wanted an amusement outside of us. This is why everything was created, and with an immense outpouring of our most pure love, we delivered this creature from our omnipotent breath, so that we might amuse ourselves with her, and she might be happy with us, and with all the things we created for love of her. Now, was it not destroying our purpose, that fact that the one who was to serve only to make us rejoice and to amuse ourselves together, by withdrawing from our will, served us bitterness? And by departing from us, instead of amusing himself with us, he amused himself with the things created by us, and with his own passions, putting us aside. Was it not turning the whole purpose of creation upside down? Do you see, then, how necessary it is that we restore our rights and that the creature return into our womb, so that we may restart our amusements? But she must return there where man made our sorrow begin, and bind herself to our will with an indissoluble bond. She must dismiss hers, to live in ours. This is why I am working in your soul, and you follow the work of your Jesus, who wants to place in currents the gifts, the suspended graces, which are there in my will. February 28th, 1926, Volume 19. Every time the soul occupies herself with herself, she loses one act in the divine will. What it means to lose this act. I continued amid my usual fears, and my always lovable Jesus, making himself seen, all goodness told me, "My daughter, do not lose time, because every time you occupy yourself with yourself, it is an act of my will that you lose. And if you knew what it means to lose one single act in my will, you lose a divine act, that act which embraces everything and everyone, and which contains all the goods that exist in heaven and on earth. More so, since my will is a continuous act which never stops its course, nor can it wait for you when you stop with your fears. It is more appropriate for you to follow it in its continuous course, than for it to wait for you to place yourself on the way in order to follow it. And not only do you lose time, but having to pacify you and to raise you from your fears in order to put you on the way in my will, you force me to occupy myself with things which do not regard the supreme volition. Your very angel, who is near you, remains on an empty stomach, because every act you do in it, as you follow its course, is one more accidental beatitude which he enjoys, being near you, and it is a doubled paradise of joys that you offer him, in such a way that he feels happy in his destiny of having you in his custody. And since the joys of heaven are communal, your angel offers the accidental beatitude he has received from you, his doubled paradise, to the whole celestial court, as the fruit of the divine will of his protected one. All make feast and magnify and praise the power, the sanctity, the immensity of my will. Therefore be attentive. In my will one cannot lose time. There is much to do. You have to follow the act of a God which is never interrupted." Having said this, he disappeared, and I remained concerned in seeing the evil I was doing, And I said to myself, how can it ever be possible that by placing myself in the divine volition, forgetting about everything else, as if nothing else existed for me but the eternal will alone, I take part in all that this lovable will contains? And Jesus, returning, added, My daughter, it is just for one who is born in my will to know the secrets it contains. And besides, the thing in itself is very easy and as though natural. Suppose that you went to live in a house, either for a short time or forever, in which there is beautiful music and a fragrant air, through which one feels infused with new life. Indeed, you had not put that music or that balsamic air in it, but since you find yourself in that house, which is not yours, you come to enjoy both the music and the fragrant air, which regenerates your strengths to new life. Add that this house contains enchanting paintings, beautiful things that enrapture, gardens which you had never seen before, with so many different plants and flowers that it is impossible to count them all, delicious lunches which you had never enjoyed before. Oh, how you amuse yourself! How you delight and enjoy yourself in admiring so many beauties, in savoring foods so tasty! However, of all this, nothing was made or placed by you. Yet you take part in everything just because you are in that house. Now, if this happens in the natural order, much more easily can it happen in the supernatural order of my will. By entering into it, the soul forms one single act with the divine will, and as though naturally she takes part in what it does and contains. More so since, in order to live in my will, the soul is first stripped of the garments of the old guilty Adam, and is clothed anew with the garments of the new and holy Adam. Her garment is the light of the supreme will itself, through which all its divine manners are communicated to her, which are noble and communicative to all. This light makes her lose the human features and restores in her the physiognomy of her Creator. What is the wonder, then, if you take part in all that the divine will possesses, since one is the life and one the will? Therefore be attentive. I recommend to you, be always faithful to me, and your Jesus will keep the pace of making you live always in my will. I will be on guard that you may never go out of it. February 28, 1928, Volume 23. Just as God has the hierarchy of angels in heaven, with 9 distinct choirs, so will he have the hierarchy of the children of his kingdom with 9 more choirs. Condition of the late confessors, and how the memory of Father de Francia will not be extinguished in this work. I was thinking about the holy divine volition, and 1,000 thoughts crowded my poor mind. They seemed like many stronger lights that were arising, that then unified themselves within the same light of the eternal sun of that Fiat that knows no setting. But who can say what I was thinking? I was thinking about the many knowledges spoken to me by Jesus on the divine will, and how each of them brings a divine life into the soul, with the imprint of a rarity of beauty, of happiness, but distinct from one another, that it places in common with one who has the good of knowing it and of loving it. So I thought to myself, one knowledge more or less, there will be great difference between one soul and another. So I felt sorrow in remembering my late confessors, who had had so much interest in making me write what blessed Jesus would tell me on the divine will. I felt sorrow for venerable Father de Francia, who had made so many sacrifices in coming from far away, meeting expenses for the publication, and just when things were moving forward, Jesus brought him to heaven with himself. So since these did not possess all that regards the fiat, they will not possess all the lives and rarities of beauty and happiness that these knowledges contain. But while my mind was wandering amidst many thoughts, such that if I wanted to tell them all I would be too long, my sweet Jesus stretched out his arms within my interior, and spreading light, he told me, "My daughter, just as I have the hierarchy of angels, with 9 distinct choirs, so will I have the hierarchy of the children of the kingdom of my divine fiat. It will have its 9 choirs, and they will distinguish themselves from one another according to the varieties of beauties that they have acquired by knowing, some more, some less, the knowledges that pertain to my fiat. Therefore each additional knowledge about my divine volition is one new creation that it forms in creatures, of happiness and of unreachable beauty, because it is a divine life that runs within it, bringing within itself all the shades of the beauties of he who manifests them, and all the keys and sounds of the joys and happinesses of our divine being. So if our paternal goodness exposes its life, its beauty and happiness, to the point of creating it in the midst of creatures, and they do not interest themselves in knowing it, in order to take it by means of our knowledges already given to them, it is not right that they receive either the beauty or the sounds of our joys as their own endowments. They will take what they have known. Therefore there will be various choirs in the hierarchy of the kingdom of my divine will. If you knew what difference will pass between those who bring my knowledges from the earth and those who will acquire them in heaven. The first will have them as their own endowments, and one will see in them the nature of the divine beauty, and will hear the same sounds of the joys and happinesses that their Creator makes one hear, and forms. On the other hand, in the second, these will be neither their own nature nor their own endowments, but they will receive them as the effects of the communication of others, almost as the earth receives the effects of the sun, but does not possess the nature of the sun. Therefore those who will possess all the knowledges will form the highest choir, and according to their knowledge, so will the different choirs be formed. However, all those who have acquired these knowledges, whether in full or in part, will have the noble title of children of my kingdom, because for one who has the good of knowing them, in order to make them one's own life, these knowledges on my fiat have the virtue of ennobling the creature, and of making the vital humors of the divine life flow within the soul, and of raising her to her first origin. And they are like the brush of the "Let us make man in our image and likeness," and they portray the image of the Creator in the creature. As for some knowing more and some less, then the nobility of these will not be destroyed. It will happen, for example, as to a noble family that has many children, some of whom give themselves to studying, and others to fine arts. Those elevate themselves more, have high and decorous positions, are known, loved, and esteemed more, since, because of the sciences that they possess, they do more good in the midst of the people, that the other brothers do not do. But in spite of this, the fact that, by their sacrifices, these elevate themselves so much, does not destroy the other brothers being noble, because all of them carry within themselves the noble blood of their father, and therefore they dress in a noble fashion. They have noble manners in operating and in speaking, in everything. Such will be the children of my fiat, all noble. They will lose the roughness of the human volition, the miserable rags of passions, the darkness of doubts, of fears, will be put to flight by the light of my knowledges, and will cast all into a sea of peace. Therefore your confessors who have passed into the next life will be like the prelude of the children of my will. In fact, the first one sacrificed himself very much and worked to help the tiny little field of your soul. And even though at that time I spoke to you little about my fiat, because first I had to dispose you, he will be like the first herald, like the dawn that announces the day of the kingdom of my will. The second and the third confessors of yours, who so much participated and knew in great part the knowledges of my will, and made so much sacrifice, especially the third one, who so much loved that they become known, and sacrificed himself so much in writing, will be like the rising sun, that placing itself on its course forms the day full of light. Those who follow will be like the full midday of the great day of my will. According to the interest they have had and will have, they will be placed, some at the first hour of the day of my volition, some at the second, some at the third, and some at the full midday. And do you think that the memory of Father de Francia, his many sacrifices and desires to make my will known, to the point of initiating the publication, will be extinguished in this great work of my divine fiat, only because I brought him with me to heaven? No, no, on the contrary, he will have the first place, because by coming from far away, he went as though in search of the most precious thing that can exist in heaven and on earth, of the act that glorifies me the most, or rather will give me complete glory on the part of creatures, and they will receive complete goods. He prepared the ground so that my divine will might be known, so much so that he spared nothing, neither expenses nor sacrifices, and even though the publication did not have its completion, by even just initiating it, he prepared the ways so that one day the work of my will in the midst of creatures can be known and have life. Who will ever be able to destroy the fact that Father de Francia has been the first initiator in making known the kingdom of my will? And only because his life was extinguished, the publication did not have its completion. So when this great work becomes known, his name, his memory, will be full of glory and of splendor, and he will have his prime act in a work so great, both in heaven and on earth. In fact, why is there a battle going on, and almost everyone yearns for victory, to win in holding the writings on my divine fiat? Because he had brought the writings with himself in order to publish them. Had it not been so, who would have talked about it? No one. And if he had not made others comprehend the importance, the great good of these writings, no one would have interested himself. Therefore, my daughter, my goodness is so great that I reward justly and superabundantly the good that the creature does, especially in this work of my will that I so much care for. What will I not give to those who occupy and sacrifice themselves in order to place in safety the rights of my eternal fiat? I will exceed so much in giving as to make heaven and earth astonished. On hearing this, I thought to myself, if these knowledges contain so much good, if blessed Jesus continues after my death with more knowledges on his fiat to other souls, will a work so great not be attributed to that work? And Jesus, moving as though hurriedly in my interior, added, No, no, my daughter, just as of Father de Francia it will be said that he has been the first propagator, and your confessors have been cooperators, so it will be said that the little daughter of my will has been the first and the depository of a good so great, to whom it was entrusted, and who was chosen with a special mission. Suppose that someone has made an important invention. It might be that others propagate it, diffuse it more, imitate it, expand it. But no one will be able to say, I am the inventor of this work. It will always be said, the inventor was such and such. The same will be with you. it will be said that the origin of the kingdom of my Fiat, the depository, was the little daughter of my will. End of February 28th. Fiat.